Welcome to the Stay Grounded podcast, brought to you by Java Press Coffee Company. My name is Raj Jana, and I'm the Chief Brewing Officer here at Java Press, where we help people make daily happiness a priority using the coffee we love. I interview people from all walks of life to discuss happiness, success, fulfillment, and ways to infuse it all into daily life. I want to dissect different thought processes and turn them into powerful insights that empower you to stay grounded and make daily happiness and fulfillment a reality. So thanks for joining me today. Now, let's get to grinding. Yo, welcome back to episode 32 of the Stay Grounded podcast. I'm your host, Raj. Super grateful and excited to be introducing this week's guest, Mr. John Israel. So John, you're going to see in the interview, you're going to hear the heart that this man has. So John is the founder of the Mr. Thank You Project, which is a project with the mission to elevate the level of gratitude on the planet by 1%, by inspiring 74 million thank you cards written all over the world. So for those of you who don't know John, he started this journey by committing to write 5 thank you cards a day for different people every single day for an entire year. So he wrote 5 thank you cards a day, and which is mind-blowing to me, and you're going to hear all about this in the episode, but just how that experience changed his life, how it changed his capacity to love, give, and just grow and be happy. I mean, it really warmed my heart the entire time. And he's on an amazing mission. He just wrote a new book, which is out now on Amazon, The Mr. Thank You Project, a journey to elevate the level of gratitude on the planet, one card at a time. And he gives so much back. And so definitely pick up the book. It's incredible, and I hope it inspires you. He's also got a lot of amazing resources that he's making available to us. If you go to his website, mrthankyou.com, you can actually create an account where you can log every single thank you card you write, which is incredible. So, I mean, it's just everything he's doing is amazing. He's got a free 30-day challenge, mrthankyou.com/30, which allows you to get into the habit of writing a thank you card every day, which is, like I said, amazing. But beyond that, this episode really dives into how John grew as an individual and how much we can all learn by just giving thanks. I definitely left this episode incredibly inspired and just grateful for everyone in my own life, including you guys who are a part of this journey, being just here, listening and growing and trying to become the best versions of yourself by just making yourself happier one day at a time. And so I hope you enjoy this episode. This is one of my favorite episodes we've done. John is just such an incredible person, and I'm just like, you guys are going to be blown away by just how far he's taken this. And so I'm inspired to be a part of that journey now and just give thanks. But before we dive into the episode, if you haven't already, rate, subscribe, review the Stay Grounded podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us. I'm grateful you guys are listening. And if you have any feedback, leave us a review or send me a personal email at chiefbrewer@javapress.com. Javapress has an E at the end. And yeah, just get in touch. I want to hear from you guys. And God, I'm just going to stop talking and let John take over now. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Mr. John Israel. Cheers. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Stay Grounded podcast. Super excited today to be inviting my new friend, Mr. John Israel. How are you, my friend?
Doing good, man.
Excited, brother. I know we've been trying to get this thing, this powwow scheduled for a while, and I'm really excited to have you here.
Yeah, excited to be on the Stay Grounded podcast, man.
Yeah, you've got an amazing story, and I can't wait to share it. So I know let's dive into it. So I know that I already gave a sort of an intro behind John and everything he's up to. So I'm going to dive into some of the more meatier questions right off the bat.
Shoot, let's do it.
So I think that Mr. Thank You in general has got a very inspiring mission. And I know you talk in length about how you came to this space, but define gratitude in your own terms. Because I think that of all people, like I have my own definition of gratitude, but for you, I would love to hear from your own perspective, sort of what you define gratitude to mean and why you think it's so important to exercise it on a daily basis.
Yeah. So the best definition I don't want to say I came up with it, and I read it by out of Dr. Eamon's book. He's one of the professors of psychology at UC Davis, and he's the foremost philosopher, or I would say researcher, on the topic of gratitude. And so he said the best definition of gratitude that he's found is the emotion you feel when you receive a gift or experience something as a gift. And what I really like about that distinction is that when it's something that you experience as a gift, it opens up to interpretation for a lot of different things that you could receive. It could be a great conversation from somebody, that can be perceived as a gift because they took the time to do those, to say what they said, or someone taking the time to do something for you, that could be considered a gift. Or also it could be a challenge in your life, in someone's life, that when you view the gifts from that experience, you can have an emotion of gratitude present. So I think that's the best definition I found for gratitude, is the emotion you feel when you receive a gift or experience something as a gift. And so for me, I would say that, what's valuable about gratitude in my life, and I think it's funny because this whole thing started because, by trade, I'm a gratitude salesman. So I run a gifting company, and we do gifts for businesses and whatnot. And I was just trying to, it's funny because my business was about gratitude. But if you asked 100 people who know John Israel, what do you know about John? They would say some nice stuff, but I don't think the word grateful or appreciative would be any of, maybe driven or whatever, but not grateful, which is kind of inconsistent, right? If I say this is my highest value or one of my high values for my business, but I don't honor it, that's just out of alignment. So for me, all of this whole project came out of the desire to be in alignment, and I had tried things of, gratitude exercises, writing down what I was grateful for every day. And I still do that now. And I think that's important. But for me, what I learned, there was such a powerful distinction about, why the Mr. Thank You project, I think, has really affected a lot of people, is that it's not having gratitude be a personal thing, that it's just for you to experience.
Yeah.
But when you live gratitude as an expression in communication with other people, it just lives very differently, because so much is required to express gratitude. There's vulnerability, there's openness, there's perspective. There's so many things that are required to actually tell somebody thank you, to notice what there is to be appreciative about somebody, and then to have the guts to actually say it or to write it in a card and give it to them. So for me, I think that's really where I feel gratitude as an expression has such a high value for me, but also I think for a lot of people when they hear about the story.
You mentioned something really interesting towards the beginning of that explanation, and it was about how you look at everything that's happening in your eyes through the lens of gifting. And there was one point where you said even struggles or pain, and seeing and being grateful for the gifts that come from that. That's a really hard thing for me to internalize in my own life. Like, I have a lot of trouble sometimes being grateful for the things that struggles bring me, because they feel so painful in the moment. How did you cultivate that skill? And how has that skill sort of grown over time? Were you always like this? Even, I know you mentioned that gratitude wasn't something that you were practicing like naturally in your own business, but how did you cultivate it and turn it into something where you're looking at all these hardships in your life for all these things that aren't necessarily what I would personally consider to be like, oh, I'm grateful for? Like, how did you rewire that, man? That's incredible to me.
Yeah, so that's a great question, by the way, because the origins of this project, I would say the seed that was planted that started it all was back when I was 23 years old, and I had just started my personal growth journey. And I remember I went to a seminar, and I was at a stage in my life where I was ready for transition. So I was in sales and marketing, and I was just ready to move on to something else. But I always have been, I remember being told like, hey, it's good to not just wander aimlessly, but to go with some direction. So that's why I chose to go to this seminar. And there was a lot of things said, but one thing that was very distinct was this concept that in every life experience, there is a gift. And your job is to find it. And that was the one thing that really stuck out for me, because I did not view my life as a gift.
Yeah.
I viewed most of my life as a struggle. My parents didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid growing up. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. They sent all of us to private school, not because they had a lot of money, but because they valued education really highly. But also that meant I was this broke kid hanging out with all these rich kids who had BMWs. And I remember the day that I had to borrow money from my track coach just to buy my Letterman jacket. So for me growing up, it always just felt more difficult to be in Israel. And so I always felt I had to work harder for everything I had. So I would remember being in this, and also I had a lot of resentment towards my parents, because, we were always broke. And I'm like, if you just sent us to public school, we'd be fine, and you'd actually have money, and you wouldn't need to rely on your kids to support you. And I was just really bitter as a late teenager, early 20-year-old. And it was in that moment that I just started to see, well, what's the gift in that life experience for you, John? And what I saw was that, who I had become because I had to work for everything I had, is I was a very self-reliant, very independent, successful 23-year-old. I mean, I was already making 6 figures at my job.
Yeah.
By that time. And most of my friends had just gotten their first jobs out of college. So there was so much that I had finally the moment to actually take the perspective and think, wow, there are a lot of gifts and benefits because of my life circumstances.
Yeah.
And so suddenly I was grateful, and I immediately called my parents and I thanked them for the life they lived and all the sacrifices they made for their kids. And it was just a really great bonding experience. But I also felt there were so many more people in my life that I needed to thank and appreciate for their influence. So then I literally had a day where I was just calling people and emailing them, old teachers, my old track coach, all these people in my life that mattered to me. And I just basically just poured my heart out, and I shared how much I was appreciative for what they had done for me, even though I didn't realize it in that moment. And every conversation that I had, it was like that level of gratitude just grew and grew. And it wasn't like a search for gratitude. It was just a natural expression of what I felt people deserved to hear. And out of that, by the end of that day, I remember feeling like, I told myself, I was like, I have never felt this grateful in my life. And if I could do this every single day, if I could feel like this every day, I could die happy.
Was it scary to put yourself out there like that when you hadn't practiced it in so long? Or like, was it when it was something that was new to you, like appreciating at that magnitude? Like, how far did you want to take it? Because that sounds good just hearing it right now.
Right. And there's also, I'm a male, we're both males, and that's often, viewed as more of like a feminine nature to express appreciation and love. And we can maybe be perceived as weak or whatever, but and I think where I really have benefited is I was just in such an emotional state where I was feeling vulnerable and open. And I was like, I'm not worried about what they think of me. I just need to tell them, how I feel, and tell them thank you. And the only thing I got back was just like gratitude and love and tears, and just people who were like, it was like I got to give some people purpose in their life because they got to see how what they did had an impact on me. And I'm talking about mentors, coaches, old bosses that I had. And, I remember hearing one of my mentors say, hey, you know what? I don't get these calls often, but when I do, like, this is why I do what I do. So by sharing with people the impact they had on me, I saw that it gave them more purpose in their work. It gave them more fire to go through their own challenges, to be who they need to be for the people around them. And so for me, I was like, I just kind of gave up that maybe this is weird or uncomfortable. And I was like, I just have to tell people. And if they're going to be weird about it, well, that's on them.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love the commitment to yourself, because ultimately I've always felt like the better care you take care of yourself, the more you can give back to others. And this was a beautiful way for you to not only share gratitude for others, but also to fill yourself with an amazing fuel that gave yourself this almost lift to go out there and continue making people feel good. So I want to transition into the Mr. Thank You project itself, of you actually taking the time to write the letters. Because we talked about this a little earlier before we got on, but it was that's not an easy task to write 5 letters a day. What drove you to write 5? Why 5? And did you ever think, why not 15? Why not 20?
Absolutely. So, for me, by trade, like in my work, in my business, the way that I sell my product, I speak at events and conferences, and I'm a storyteller by nature, and I just love telling stories. And I was talking to my coach at the time, and I was just like, man, I just feel like my stories are like just old. Like I just feel like, I'm telling the same story for 10 years, and I'm not inspired by it. And his response was really simple. He's like, sounds like you just need to do some inspiring shit with your life. And I was like, yeah, I guess that's probably true. Maybe I should find something inspiring to do. So that just kind of like opened my peripheral of like, what's something that I could do? And I'm all about challenges. I love doing annual challenges, 30-day challenges, because for me, it pushes my ability of what I know myself capable of doing. Like one year I gave up dessert for an entire year. Like I just wouldn't have ice cream, and I'm a huge dessert guy. So that was a big challenge. My wife and I, was a year we got married. She gave up shopping for a year, and I gave up dessert for a year. And so that's just kind of how we do things. We're funny like that. And it was a really extraordinary year. So I thought, what's something that I could take on myself that would be a big challenge? And obviously aligning with my business about gratitude, I thought, really I want my business to, something to do with elevating my level of gratitude every day. So I just looked at what are the best habits I've seen out there, and thank you cards were something that I had seen people do. And for me, it was, if I wanted to create a habit, and this is really important, I wanted to find a habit that I could do every day for an entire year, no matter what, no matter where I am, because I do travel a lot. And so if I'm in a hotel in Toronto or Southern California or Dallas, Texas, I need to be able to do this thing anyways. That's one of the challenges that people take on, like crazy exercise regimens that you're only going to be able to do if you can go to the one gym you can actually do that workout in. Unless you don't leave and travel anywhere, then I think it's hard to fall full on that. So for me, I thought about what's a way, how many let's think about thank you cards. How many would be an amount that would inspire me every day? And I thought, well, I could do one card every day. Like, I don't think that's too hard, but I also don't think that would inspire anybody, because part of this was I wanted to do something that would inspire my clients, just inspire people in general to be bigger than just what I would do. And then I thought, well, what about 10 a day? I could do 10. And I was like, dude, that's like 3,600 thank you cards. Honestly, I don't know how much time that would take, but I think if I had to write 10 every day, I just don't think they'd be very good.
Yeah.
Then I thought about 5. I was like, no, it's kind of like that Goldilocks moment of like, oh, this port is too hot. This port is too cold. This is just right. Like 5 just felt just right. But I also felt like, man, that would be hard. But I needed, and the other parameters of that, Raj, was I had rules in place. So all the cards had to be handwritten. They weren't typed. They weren't emails or text messages. Everything had to be handwritten. 5 needed to be done before I went to bed. So it didn't have to be done by midnight, but it had to be before I was actually out for the night. Meaning I couldn't do 35 on Sunday, because I knew that's something I would allow myself to do if I gave myself the room for that, which would really annoy the heck out of my wife. So, and then the third was I needed to make sure I would write a max of 3 cards per person. And part of this is I really wanted to challenge my creativity, because part of a challenge inside of the challenge was to explore my capacity to experience and express gratitude. Meaning, like, what are areas that would challenge me to grow my gratitude? Not just like, hey, thanks, Grandma, for that present you gave me. Like, that's how a lot of people have a perspective of what is gratitude. It's like, oh, or what is a thank you card? It's like, oh, it's that thing you write after your graduation. You got all the presents, and you got to thank everybody who showed up to the party. Or if you got married, you send it to everyone who gave you a gift. It's like, it's more of an obligatory thing. And so for me, I wanted it to really be an actual expression of gratitude, not an obligation. So that's why I limited to number 1, doing 3 per person, because I didn't want it to be also, I would probably annoy my wife if I wrote her 75 thank you cards, which I could see myself doing if I allowed myself to write as many as I wanted to anybody. Right. So I limited to 3 per person. And I committed, if I miss a single day, I will donate $1,000 to charity. So for any and every single day I missed, I would donate $1,000.
How many days did you miss?
So what motivated me to keep doing it? Number 1, it was just that initial commitment. Really setting those rules in place allowed me to follow through. Like, no, it wasn't gray area. It wasn't like, well, does this count or does that count? Or, did I write 5 by the end of the day? Okay, cool. Great. You passed. If you didn't, then you owed $1,000. And that was the case.
How much money did you donate to charity?
0. I hit every day. Dude, here's how crazy it was. I had one day. I was so beat. It was like 8 p.m. I came home, long day with clients. I was just so tired, lay down on the couch, threw on some Netflix, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to close my eyes. And I hadn't written a single card. I pass out and I'm dreaming. I'm like deep sleep dreaming. In my dream, my wife walks up to me and shakes me and says, John, wake up. You have to write your cards.
Oh,
and I wake up and literally, my wife was nowhere to be found, by the way. She was asleep with the kids. She was gone. I looked at the clock. It was 11:59 p.m. Again, not that they needed to be done by midnight, but it was like my subconscious was so trained at this point, because it was a couple months into the project, that I would not allow myself to not complete it. It was totally insane.
That's phenomenal. I love that. I mean, dude, I admire how committed you are to the process. And I think what I'm more admired by is how much you've elevated your capacity to express. So I'd like to ask some questions on that in general. Like, when you're writing a thank you card, like, how do you tap into, and what do you tap into to really write words that are truly an expression of your gratitude, as opposed to just those, hey, thank you for the gift, or hey, thank you for being you? Like, how do you go deeper?
Great question. And there's a definition I want to bring up that will help people understand this concept of appreciation and gratitude. So the root or the origination of the word appreciate is appreciare, which is Latin for to appraise or to set the value of a thing. And so specifically that would look like, if you had a home you wanted to sell, or a piece of jewelry you wanted to sell, before you find out how much it's worth, you need to have an appraiser come out and look at it and consider it. And they've got a list of questions that they go through to really look at something and consider what is the value of this thing. And then they tell you, this is the value. So how do we bring that to another human being? It's really simple. It's bringing curiosity to, who is this person? What do they care about? What are their values? What are their struggles? What are their biggest obstacles in their life? And that's the questions to ask before writing someone's card. So for me, I give you an example of how that looks. So one of the stories that was really interesting one was, I was boarding. It was on day 3, and I was boarding an airplane, and I was thinking, okay, well, who am I going to thank today? Which is kind of an interesting question to have to ask yourself every day. Is like, who's going to get my thank you cards? Who deserves it? So you're kind of become this good finder in your life, because you're looking for people to acknowledge and appreciate. So I was boarding a plane, and I thought, I want to acknowledge the pilots on this plane, because I always, every time I take off, I pray for safe travel. To date, they have 100% delivered. I rarely, if ever, see them, because they're in that locked room, understandably. But I never get to thank them and acknowledge them for that. I mean, they literally have thousands of lives at their fingertips. So I decided I'm going to write a card to the pilots. So I had 2 legs on this trip. So I had 4 pilots I'd write cards for. So I sit down in my seat and I start asking those questions. Who is this person? What is their life like? What are their biggest struggles? What are their big goals? Why do they do what they do? And I thought, well, as a pilot, that's not a job that you get by accident, right? It's not like when you work at Chili's long enough that they just promote you to the store manager. It's not like you work at baggage claim and then eventually you're flying the plane. It doesn't work like that. You have to intentionally want to do that. It might have even been a goal for their life. And then I thought, well, and not only that, but they went through hours and hours of flight simulations and training and psychological testing just to become a pilot. And then every single day they have thousands of people's lives at their fingertips. And then they go into turbulence and all sorts of crazy stuff, only to land and have people complain about the slightly rough landing. And then on top of that, I thought, well, when I travel, I miss my family. But that's only when I travel. This is literally their job. They're constantly away from their family. So, man, they sacrifice a lot. They do a lot for us, and we never even see them. We never get to say thank you. So I essentially took all of those things and I kind of composed them into a really simple thank you card, saying basically everything that I just expressed. And as I'm getting off the plane, because people say, well, where did you get their addresses? I don't get their addresses. I hand them the card when I get off the plane. That's how I do that. So I gave them the cards. And this particular day, I had my business stationery that had my email and my phone number on it, which I don't normally have. I don't usually use those cards for non, business clients, but I had them anyway. So I gave it to him. What was crazy, Raj, is that within 24 hours of landing, 3 out of the 4 of those pilots personally emailed me back to thank me they emailed me or texted me. One of them texted me to say thank you for the thank you card that they received. And one went on to say, in my 12 years of flying, I have never received a thank you card from a passenger. And you know what? You're totally right. We miss so much stuff with our family and our kids, and I appreciate you taking the time to acknowledge us for it.
Holy crap, man.
And that's someone who's a pilot who's got a pretty dang important job. What about everybody else in the world? And so, my thing was, 5 cards every day. 5 cards every day, that's for 365, that's 1,825 thank you cards. There's way more people in the world than that. So for me, the year became was this opportunity to really practice. Part of this was this project for me, my year-long journey was being like the crash test dummy and challenging my capacity to experience and express gratitude and doing all sorts of fun, goofy, maybe some weird stuff. I wrote thank you cards to the IRS agents who were, went with my payment for my taxes.
That's a hard one, man. That's a hard one.
I wrote one to the dude in charge of Plano City Trash about our garbage guy because he did such an amazing job and went above and beyond. And I just found so many different, interesting, creative ways because I wanted for me, if I could do that and people got to hear those stories, they might say for themselves, okay, that's amazing. I don't think I would do 5, but I could do 1. I could write 1 card every single day for a year. And that's sort of where the mission expanded to not just me writing 5 thank you cards every day, but to elevating the level of gratitude on the planet by 1% by inspiring 74 million thank you cards written around the world, which is effectively 1% of the world's population. Dude,
this is awesome. And I think more than anything, it's a crash course in empathy. You just, like you said, something about the pilots. I didn't even think about that. You're right. They put themselves in a position away from family. And we talk a lot about military, it's more talked about a lot, but there's so many different people in different parts of the world doing different amazing things in their own space that you don't really get to see. I think what you're doing is amazing. And I think I just want to commend that because, how did your own capacity to be empathetic change? Did you start to notice that? How did you see it compound? I guess I want to hear about the stories that came from this, and what's the most proud thing that's happened for you since starting this, and just how good did it feel?
You got some good questions, Raj.
I'm curious, man.
So the compounding effect, and by the way, empathy is the right word. And I think that, what I tell people is that, curiosity is the birthplace of appreciation, and appreciation is the starting point of empathy. And when we have empathy, we have the ability to develop compassion. And when we have compassion for people, we can literally connect with anybody. And so I think that when you start to view everybody as not just a person doing a job, but a human being in a role, you start to realize that they're just like you and me. How we made different decisions or been raised a certain way, we would be the same people. I just believe that. So for me, it's not a matter of how do I thank this type of person? It's no, how do I thank this person based on who they are and the life that they've lived? And so it's not a matter of if, but it's what do I need to consider and be aware of? And sometimes it's not even so an interesting one was I was on a drive in San Francisco to the Berkeley airport. And as I was with this Uber driver, I thought, wow, this, I feel like this might be an interesting one to write a thank you card to. And I thought that I don't know, what would I say to this guy? So part of it was just being curious and asking him questions how long have you been doing this job? What do you love about it? What's the hardest part? Have they had anything crazy happen in a cab before? What's the most important thing for you in this job? When did you move to this country? Because he was from, a different country. And it was so amazing to just get to learn who he was. That I just was, he was, he moved here about 2 years ago, and he's from Nigeria, and he sends half of his paycheck back home to his family, and he's just working hard every day to hopefully bring his family over here. And I just thought, dude, he's just like me. He is a husband who's working to support his family. That's great. He just happens to drive a car. I just do something different. So it, for me, it was just, that's all I needed to know to be able to appreciate someone for where they were. Now, an interesting, like when you talk about a compounding effect, and this is an interesting insight that came out of all this gratitude that I was writing, is that you actually now become responsible for valuing and appreciating your relationships. And to give you an example of that, right? So I wrote this really great letter to my wife, loving her, thanking her for who she is and being the love of my life and taking care of our kids and all this stuff. And then the next day I woke up, and we had just moved to Dallas, Texas. And we're big on coffee. We drink a lot of coffee, by the way, as I know that is an important, process in your life. And so I woke up one morning. We have a process that I wake up early. I make a French press, and I make it half for me, and then I pour the other half in a carafe for her, sealed, so that she can have it when she wakes up. That's our process. So we just had our second child, and I was about to make coffee, and then I realized we're out of grinds. And we just moved to this new house, and we only had one car at the time, and I needed to leave to go meet some clients. So I had to take the only car, and we had no coffee in the house. Now for me, it wasn't a big deal because I would just drive to Starbucks and I would get some coffee and I'll be fine. But her, on the other hand, with no car, 2 very small children that she was taking care of 100%, and no coffee in the house, on top of minimal sleep, because our son was like literally weeks old.
Yeah.
I remember she woke up right when I was leaving, and I kissed her goodbye, and I said, "Oh, by the way, we're out of coffee." And I just saw like the despair in her eyes, just like,
yeah, man.
Oh my God, like this is going to be the worst day. So as I leave, I'm driving over to the coffee shop, and as I'm going through there getting my coffee, I'm just thinking, how can you be this dude who claims all this love and gratitude for your wife, yet leave her hanging without any coffee? Yet you're going to go out and do this yourself, and take care of you. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to go bring her back some coffee. Now that sounds simple, but it was a window in traffic where if I did that, it would take me an extra 15 minutes, which would add 45 minutes to my drive because I would hit all the worst Dallas traffic. And so it would basically add like 45 minutes to an hour to my day if I were to do this. Plus I had a client that I was going to meet, and I'd be late to my client. So those were the ramifications.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I'm just going to deal with it, and I'm going to bring my wife this cup of coffee. And I go back and I write a really simple note, and she still says like this is her favorite note she ever got from me. And I drove home. I set the cup of coffee on the front doorstep with a note, and all it said was, "You are always worth a warm cup of coffee."
Oh, dude.
And here was the thing: is I got to leave and go meet with my client. The funny thing, the client wound up being late anyway, so I wasn't even late, so it worked out. But I then got to spend the rest of that drive that I still was in traffic, but feeling good about the decisions that I made and how I took care of her, because, you don't just get to say, "Oh, I'm grateful for you," but then not act upon it. It's like if there's a salesperson who says, "We're so committed to service," but they don't return phone calls.
Yep.
So it's a matter of like when you make a declaration, like when you write a handwritten note expressing your love, appreciation, and gratitude for somebody, you're now responsible for honoring that relationship. And I remember there's an experience. I wrote a thank you card to my assistant who worked at an old office space that I was at. And it was so funny. It almost got annoying because she loved her. That note meant so much to her. She almost became too helpful. She'd be like, would like show up and like bring, donuts and brownies and pie, and like she'd drop things off and come in like, "Do you need anything?" And I'm like, "Listen, I just need to freaking work. Like, just let me work." And I had to catch myself because I'm like, am I now pushing her away? Like there's some context to creative, like, hey, don't interrupt during these things. But when you express appreciation, you attract more things into your life.
Yeah.
And if you don't keep that channel open, and you start to block off and just focus on work and not continue to support and serve and receive from other people, then it kind of derails the process. So for me, the statement became, how do you treat that for which you are grateful? And that for me was a really big litmus test for how I'm acting every day and how I serve and support my clients and my family and my communities, and it helped keep me on point with what I said I was committed to.
I love that, man. I might want to get that written down somewhere. How is your perspective of what's truly important to you evolved over time?
What's important to me? Can you clarify that?
Well, you just told a story about how you decided to go get your wife coffee as opposed to meeting with the client on time, but inadvertently the client ended up being late anyways. So have you noticed this cycle that the more you choose to treat the things in your life that you're grateful for and honor that, have you seen the world sort of like kind of play to your favor? And how has that sort of crafted your own personal dedication to what's truly important in your life?
Yeah. So here was a game changer on month 2 of the Mr. Thank You Project. When I was writing my thank you cards, and I got a call from my best friend, and he told me that his dad had passed away. And it was really unfortunate because I was really close with his dad as well. He was kind of like a second father to me. You know, like he took us to school dances when we were in high school, and he was like, you know, a chef, and he would make us like amazing dinners. And he was just a great guy to have in my life. And I remember when my friend told me that his dad passed away, like, number one, of course, that sucks. That doesn't feel good. The worst part, Raj, was that I had a thank you card written to my friend's dad sitting on my desk that I hadn't sent yet. And I hadn't sent it because I just got busy. I was working, I was writing thank you cards, and I was doing all the stuff that I was like in such go mode that I didn't get to tell him what he meant to me. And so for me, I mean, I still sent the card to my friend, and I said, "Hey, this is for your dad. I hope you read it and understand that this was meant for him, and hope he gets the message nonetheless." But for me, what that really created was a sense of urgency that if I have something to say to somebody, it is on me to say it. It's not, no one needs to pull it out of me, like what you appreciate about what do you appreciate about me? No one's going to ask you that. So to take it upon yourself to do it, the thing that I learned was that at the end, like what I had that in that experience was this moment of like, oh man, I wish I got to say that. Well, that happens every time somebody dies on both sides, where someone who's on their deathbed has all these things they wish they would have done or said to people that they mattered, or people they would have forgiven, or they wish they would have been more compassionate or loving towards. And that's how they feel. And on the other end, there's people who are like close to the person who dies, like, oh, I wish I would have told him this, or, you know, forgiven him for this, or all these things. And I thought, well, what if I didn't have to wait until that day? What if that's how I spent this entire year, was saying all those things? And so when I, on a macro scale and looking at my life at the end of this year, after writing 1,825 thank you cards, I feel very complete. Like there's not a lot that I still need to say to people. Like my parents know everything that I love about them. So do all my siblings. So do, you know, all the, you know, broken down relationships I had in high school and college that I wrote a letter of apology or acknowledgement for being a jerk or whoever I was back then. And by the way, Raj, sometimes it wasn't even always a card. Sometimes I just didn't feel a card was appropriate. I just pick up the phone and have a conversation. So I think that that's important for people to realize, that you don't have to be limited to like, oh, do I have to do all of this in written form? No, like the point is just be committed to expressing what you need to express with people to make sure that they know how you feel and what you mean, or what you want them to understand and get about your relationship together. And just from that point, man, like just life and relationships are on a new level that I've never experienced in my life.
Are you at peace? Just with where you are, you sound like, after you just expressed that, I felt like, obviously the listeners can't see this, but like I felt just this, like this sense of groundedness, almost like it's like you said it, there's nothing left to say. So then what do you say at this point?
Well, number one, it's a never ending cycle. Like there's still things, like I still make mistakes and I meet new people, and I, want to keep going through. I still write a lot of thank you cards. I don't write 5 every day. Sometimes I'll write 10. Sometimes I won't write one for, 7 days or whatever. So for me, moving forward, honestly, a lot of after the project, it was spending time writing the book. The book was, took me about 6 months to get it all written and edited and out. And so for me, what I took a claim in is that, I'm giving up writing a lot of thank you cards because I'm actually writing the most important thank you card of my life, which is really this book and this message, because the more people that I feel get it and get a hold of it, again, they don't have to do what I did, but I just want them to hear the stories and get the impact that, gratitude as an expression can have in someone's life, that they just adopt it in some capacity, whatever makes sense for them, whether it be one card a day or doing a 30-day challenge or something like that. So for me, there's a tremendous sense of peace. I'm also an entrepreneur, so I have other areas where my life is not peaceful. But I mean, with the case of relationships, yeah, absolutely. And I would say my relationships just live at a much higher, really symbiotic level than they ever have.
Are you hard on yourself in other parts of your life now? Or vice versa? Like, do you feel like you spent so much time doing this that now you have to make up for it in other parts of your life? How has that relationship of balance sort of come together?
So what I have now, Raj, is a tool. And I think that's what I want people to get, is that I'm not staking a claim of this is the way, the only way to have a peaceful life is to write thank you cards, right? What I did learn is that if I am feeling a certain way, if I'm not feeling good or I'm feeling scared, like I got a scarcity mind going, because that stuff's still going to happen. Client's business goes away. Oh my gosh, we've got to find a new client, yada, yada, yada. So then it's like, okay, how can I be generous in this moment? Who can I thank? Who can I appreciate?
Love that. Yep.
What is going great in my life? Who can I press in with and love on that I have a great relationship right now and grow that? And so it just became like an ability to shift my focus, and kind of a fun activity with that, by the way. And this was one of the more challenging parts. One of the sections in the book is called Gratitude and Emotional Intelligence, because a big part when people say, what did you get out of this year-long journey? One of the big things I say is I became hyper aware of my emotional state every day. Because if you have to sit down and write someone a thank you card, can you be in a lame, negative, upset attitude and write a thank you card? You can, but it's just not going to be very good. It's like, well, hey, I'm glad somebody was my birthday. It's going to come out very authentic. So for me, what became a lesson was, number one, was learning to deal with my emotions, learning to process emotions. And so I, read books on emotional intelligence and emotional management. And that was just like a really powerful tool to work through. And I had some specific exercises I would do if I had a really tough day before I would write my cards. And, another thing that I did was, if I had a painful experience or situation, the mantra became, how do I bring gratitude to this experience? And a really fun kind of story about that was, I went to, so for college, I went to Gonzaga University in Washington State, and very prideful of my school. We've got a great basketball team. And during the Mr. Thank You Project, we actually had made it to the NCAA championships in the March Madness tournament. It was a huge deal. We were ranked number one basketball school in the country at the time. We'd never been to the championship. It was a huge deal. We were playing North Carolina, and we lost. And I've never been a huge sports guy, but I do love my school. And so I've heard people get upset with like their team losing, but I physically felt depressed. Like I've never felt I don't think I've really been depressed in my life, but if I ever did, it was that moment, like sick to my stomach, this sucks. Right. And I still had my thank you cards to write. It was 9:00 at night. I'm like, dude, the last thing I want to do is thank anybody for anything right now. So then I thought, okay, this is the challenge. How can I bring gratitude to this experience? And then I thought about it, and I was like, wow, what if I wrote a thank you card to every single player of the Gonzaga men's basketball team? And so I went online, I looked up their roster, and I got everybody's name, the red shirts, the key players, the coaches, and I wrote everybody a handwritten note, just thanking them for the tremendous season. Because it wasn't like we lost the national championship. We made it to the national championship. It's further than our team has ever gone in history. That deserves celebration. So I wrote all that in the cards, and I looked at people's seasons, and I looked at their key games where they were major players, and I acknowledged that in the thank you card. Like, hey, I remember when we played this team, and you really stepped up, and you had that 20-point game, and I know it was your biggest game of the year, and that was such an important part of this season. And then even the red shirts, I wrote, hey, I know you redshirted this year, but championship teams aren't made in the championship games. They're made in all the practices leading up to this game, up to those games. I just wanted to thank you for all that you did to make our team the best that it possibly could be. And so it was so great because every time I did this was I forgot who shared this with me. But it's this concept that our experience of life lives in the conversations that we have. And if we want to change our experience of life, we just simply change our conversations. So instead of having a conversation over and over about, oh my gosh, like, well, the refs sucked, or, oh, this guy had a terrible game, we could have won, I started to have a conversation about what was great about this season, what was great about this team. And that's what I did over and over with every single player and the coaches. And I sent all these letters out, and it just felt good. Like literally instantly, Raj, like that emotion, that negative pain, depressed state was just literally gone the moment I realized how I can bring gratitude to this experience. And then here was the crazy part. So like, that was amazing, right? That was cool. 2 months later, not even kidding, on my birthday, I get a letter in the mail, and my wife says, hey, you got something from Gonzaga men's basketball. And I open it up, and it's a handwritten card from the head coach, Mark Few, thanking me for all the cards that I sent for everybody on the team. And it was just this like, I didn't ask for that. It wasn't the goal. It wasn't the intention to get something, but it was just really amazing to get this perspective of like how valuable somebody who brings hope is to a community, and someone who appreciates what's so, rather than pointing out, what's wrong with the situation. So that was just such a valuable experience to really have me see, okay, what can I appreciate here? How can I change this conversation? How do we shift the perspective and focus on what's good? And so writing thank you cards for me, it just happened to be my, if I was an artist, it happened to be my canvas. That's my manner in which I expressed myself with the world on how I felt.
Dude, you are beaming, man. I love you as a human being, and I want to send as much support I can your way for your book. Tell everyone where we can get your book, and we'll obviously make all these resources available for the listeners in many different forms. But tell me, man, how can we send a ton of thanks to you for all the things you get?
Yeah, so I mean, really now, I do, travel and speak a lot and share the story. And for me, it's really a matter of just getting the story in as many people's hands as possible. So if you want to pick up the book, it's on Amazon. It's called The Mr. Thank You Project, a journey to elevate the level of gratitude on the planet, one card at a time. So you can buy it on Amazon, super easy. And the website. So one of the things that we do now is, typically after, a podcast or, if I do a speaking engagement, people usually email back. There's people who just say, hey, I was really inspired by what you're doing. Like I'm committed to writing, one thank you card a day, or I've written 5 since you spoke. And so we want to be able to track all the cards that we inspire around the world. So if you go to mrthankyou.com, you can create a free profile, and you can literally submit the cards that you've written, and we will track them. We give you your own global gratitude number for every card that you send out, and we'll just keep updating that number. And also, you'll see it's pretty cool because when you enter someone's name that you wrote them a card, it actually logs it and keeps track for you of everybody that you sent a thank you card to. And this is kind of a tool that was built out of my experience of writing all these cards. It's because I had like a running Excel spreadsheet of who I wrote my cards to, so I wouldn't accidentally double up. And so we wanted to build a platform that allowed people to basically make gratitude a habit in their life. So if you want to do that, just go to mrthankyou.com, create a free profile, log your thank you cards, and there's some other cool resources on there as well. If you want to do a 30-day challenge, you can also go to mrthankyou.com/30, just the numerals 30, and download a free PDF. It's just, how to, do a 30-day challenge with the Mr. Thank You Project. And that's it, man. So buy the book, thank some people, tell us about it. That's it.
I love it, man. We will, like I said, this has been such I don't know what the word is, but I feel just really awesome. Like I'm going to go give my parents a hug right after this, and I'm going to go tell them how much I love them. And I just want to thank you for just being so authentic and inspiring me and I know others, to just live a life of pure abundance. And yeah, man, tons of love your way. I have one final question for you that we ask everyone on the show, and that is, in the midst of everything you're doing, everything you're going through in life, how do you stay grounded on a daily basis?
So for me, that is a great question, because I do feel grounding is important. For me, obviously, writing my thank you cards, 5 a day was one way that I did that. For me, I'm a big practitioner of the miracle morning. So I know, Hal Elrod is a good buddy of mine. So I do yoga I've literally done yoga every single day, Raj, for about 7 years. Like, I'm not kidding. If I have a 5 a.m. flight, I've done yoga in the back of a plane, because I can't go a day without it. Because for me, I've been a big practitioner of Bikram yoga, which is like heated yoga for a while. And one of the things that he talks about is like, your body is like this, this vehicle that you use, or, he's like, think of it like a toilet. Like, at the end of the day, you got to flush the toilet, whatever you put in it. Like, for me, yoga every day is like me flushing my body and getting my juices flowing for the day, to be, to be present, to be physically active, and to be grounded. So I do yoga every day. I've got my affirmations, write in a journal. I use a 5-minute journal. I use the app. And, I think for me, and this is a side note, and I think this is probably good for, anyone out there, if you've got a family or you want to have a family, but, I constantly look at, like, obviously, while I take care of my energy, I also understand the importance and the significance of my wife's energy and my family's energy. So I often ask myself, what does my family need right now? What does my wife need today to feel the energy, to feel the love that she needs to be the best that she can be? And so I just take responsibility for making sure she gets that. And that has really allowed me to be focused when I'm out in the field, that I'm not worried that I'm working too much or any of that kind of stuff, because I ask her, like, what do you need right now? How can I serve you? How can I help you? You need to take the kids. And, we've learned to develop our system such that I can grind and push super, super hard, or travel if I need to, and come home and still come home to a loving, warm household that we're going to grow together forever. And so that is probably one of the most important things in my life, is really making sure that energetically my wife is sound and my kids get everything they need from their dad.
Wise man telling a man who is not married how to have a fulfilling family when I have one. Thank you, my man. You, like I said, John, I appreciate everything you've shared, man. I'm excited for you. I know you have a lot coming your way, but I'm just really, really, really excited for you, man. The world deserves to know everything about you in an amazing way, and I'm excited to support that. So
awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, brother. And everybody, that's a wrap of this week's episode of the Stay Grounded podcast. I'm your host, Raj. Here's your friend, John. And from us, stay grounded. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of the Stay Grounded podcast, brought to you by Java Press Coffee Company. My name is Raj, and I hope you found this interview helpful as you create your own ways to make daily happiness a priority. If you're interested in learning more about how your morning coffee can turn into a consistent source of joy in your life, visit www.javapress.com to learn how our products can help you do that, and use the coupon code podcast for 10% off your purchase. Again, thanks so much for joining us. Stay grounded.